This is Seeing Red, now in our 15th season of bringing you the best in independent Red Bulls news and opinion. Now, here are your hosts, Mark Fishkin and Joe Goldstein.
Get wet with the New York Red Bulls. That's all they do is play in the rain. And Dante, Vanzeir, and Lewis Morgan carved up a Messi-less Miami to bits.
Yeah.
Yet another deluge. Seeing Red, the New York Soccer Roundup. Mark Fishkin here, Joe Goldstein there. Do these two things. They're both actionable. Like and subscribe. We appreciate that. Tonight on Seeing Red, we're going to go inside the big win over Miami. Give our Bull, maybe plural of the week. We'll keep you in suspense. Our preview of the Red Bulls visit to Orlando City. Our predictions. Our guest is Michael Citro of the Mainland blog. And your emails, Joe, I wasn't there. You weren't there. It was wet. And we both predicted not greatness.
Yeah.
Miami really didn't appear like they wanted to be there, and they certainly didn't play like they did.
Yeah, I think that that's an understatement. Although the Red Bulls definitely wanted to be there.
Yes.
They were showing out. And, you know, it started with that gesture in the beginning of the match with the kids and the coats, and continued straight through. And I got to say, I'm really impressed. Miami is like the perfect team for this team to play.
Yeah.
But I left really impressed.
Really impressed. And again, New York was missing 5 starters. Miami was missing a lot of starters. We talked last week how Herr Schwartz did not, just was focusing on being the best team that they could be. And Dante Vanzeir, after 2 kind of looks at goal that went wanting, and you kind of thinking, oh God, like please just put it together. He recognized, I guess, that rather than be the finisher, he can be the supplier. And goodness gracious, a forward that can pass to other players is something that we really haven't had. He wasn't brought in here to be an assist man.
Yeah.
He was brought in here to score goals. And yet on the day, he and Lewis Morgan pushed it all the way and were incredibly effective.
I think in particular, the second Lewis Morgan goal was like slow motion and like everyone could see it, but Miami just couldn't stop it. And that's like what we want to see out of our forward core. And credit to Wiki and Frankie and Peter Stroud. They were all up to the challenge. And I think, Gengar showed flashes too. But I think that the entire show was stolen by the front, maybe 5.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And again, on a night when so many important pieces were missing for Miami, they let Sergio Busquets rightly kind of run the show. And we saw from New York really a different kind of strategy, which was we're going to be a counterattacking team. And yes, we're accustomed to those counterattacks starting in the attacking third. But under Schwartz, I mean, we're knocking balls, winning balls in our own defensive third, and then lightning fast down the field. And again, Vanzeir's hold-up play, frankly, is what happened. He wasn't making incredibly difficult passes, to be fair.
Yeah.
But he was cutting out Miami, who was so desperate to get back and defend. And for Vanzeir, he set a record with 4 assists in 1 match for the club, which had never happened before. It's an amazing performance.
I had shades of like Inter Milan under Inzaghi. The not the shape because they play in a 3-5-2, but the interplay and the willingness to not overcommit to the press, let Miami come out, and a quick counterattack. I have said it like 3 times or more, but it was impressive, and I gotta hand it to Sandy Claus because he really blew me away in this game.
Yeah, and we all got the gifts.
Yeah.
So, Lewis Morgan, his second hat trick in club history, putting him in an exclusive an exclusive group of players with more than one hat trick for the team. BWP, to the surprise of no one, did that 5 times 5 hat tricks for New York during his time here. Amado Guevara had 3, and Clint Mathis had 2, and that's it. And now Lewis Morgan with a pair of hat tricks. Following up on that game up in Toronto a couple of years ago. And so, and let's give it up to Ryan Mara coming in, playing his first game in a while, getting his first clean sheet in a couple of years. And yes, they got a little VAR help. And I think Martinez from Miami is still flipping and flopping, and the memes were delicious of him jumping off of the high diving boards. Really, flopping around on the wet turf. Again, Red Bull Arena's ground crew, an incredible job. The field. I mean, this was a game where these teams shouldn't have been. The Red Bulls, in theory, should not have been able to have been so effective because the field should have been the great equalizer, and instead, it was really the desire of New York and the game plan. And I really hope that Miami gets fined, by the way, for not coming out for the second half. They stayed in the locker room 3, 4, 5 minutes past when they were required to be back on the field. And I genuinely hope that when disciplinary decisions come out later this week, that we're going to see a fine from Miami because,
well, they were fined. They were fined because it was 1-0 at the half, and the fine was imposed by the Red Bulls.
There you go. One of the most impressive performances that we've seen, and a week after New York gets trucked in Columbus, and we're truly the second best players in the stadium that night, they completely flipped the script and have returned to a level of optimism that we haven't seen in some time. And again, without the starting keeper, without the starting left back, without the number 10. And it didn't matter because those players that played and got minutes. And if this is Vanzeir's legacy, he's leading the league in assists. Lewis Morgan's leading the league in goals with 5. I mean, beyond expectation.
Yeah. I cautioned a slow start, and the Red Bulls made a fool at me.
Well, it wasn't you personally. I don't think it's personal. So someone online was like, "Joe got it wrong." It's like, yeah, we get it. Like, we get it right, we get it wrong. Okay, so be it. Happy to be wrong.
Yeah.
The Red Bulls again. They're now after a 5-game sprint where they're 3-1-1. They're 1 point off the Shield lead for the entire week. And again, I don't think anyone saw this. And Orlando, and then Cincinnati, and then so many more home games, and the schedule gets a lot lighter in terms of the supposed quality of the opposition. Bulls of the week. I mean,
I think Bulls.
It's both Morgan and Vanzeir. Both of them make the MLS team of the match day, and Morgan is the MLS player of the week. But on Seeing Red, we've got 2, Morgan and Vanzeir, both historic performances for New York. And the team should feel overjoyed. Really, just nothing bad happened in the match.
Yeah.
It was just the worst thing was Vanzeir skipping on a ball that he probably should have put on frame in the first half, and it doesn't matter. No one's going to be talking about that. So, Orlando away. Let's do some talks about that. That's what's coming up next. And again, Michael Citro will be joining us soon. Orlando Saturday at 7:30. Red Bulls to visit the stadium that is now called Inter & Co Stadium. All right. Orlando has really stumbled out of the gate after a fantastic season where they finished second in the East. So far, they're 1-3-1 for 4 points. That's 13th in the East. Woof. 6 points and 10 places below the Red Bulls. They've scored 4 and conceded 10 times in 5 games. And folks, that's not good enough. And that's with the Peruvian national team keeper. I mean, it's the second worst defense in MLS. They're tied with Chicago. Only New England and San Jose have conceded more. At home at Inter & Co, they're 1-1-1. It's just kind of meh. Last season, again, a really surprisingly strong performance from Oscar Pareja's guys. Really figured out what he needed out of them. They finished second in the East. They lost to eventual MLS Cup champ Columbus in the second round of the playoffs. They were obviously a lot more effective last year. They were tied for third in MLS in fewest goals conceded per match. So to go from that to conceding twice every single game, not great. Colombian striker Luis Muriel was brought in from Atalanta as a supposed replacement for forward Duncan Maguire, who was supposed to move to Bolton Wanderers, I want to say, a mid-level English team. And because they literally signed the wrong form on decision day and missed the deadline, Maguire's transfer didn't go through, which is really weird. Very talented young American who is going to be on the Olympic team this summer. Slovenian defender David Bracalo was brought in from Viking FK in Norway. Nico Ladero was brought in. I'm doing the right side of this slide first, and then we'll do the left side. Nico Ladero, everything from Seattle was brought in. And then Colombia winger Ivan Angulo was signed on a permanent deal from Palmeiras. He spent last year on loan with the club. Heading out, Gaston Gonzalez was loaned out to Nacional. Luca Petrasso headed to Triestina in Italy. Brazilian center back Antonio Carlos went back to his native Brazil with Fluminense. And Mauricio Pereira, who was an important player, also joined at Nacional. And so it's been a really tough, let's go back over here. It's been a really tough season so far for Orlando. They've got CCC in addition. They had the CONCACAF Champions Cup in addition to MLS, and they've won once. It was last week against Austin. They got off the schneid, but the club is out of the Champions Cup. They got trucked by, I want to say, Tigres. Yeah, Tigres 4-2 in Mexico in the second leg, and that put them out. They have rotated their lineup a lot. Oscar Pareja, it seemingly hasn't really settled on what his strongest team may be, and principally because he's a guy that, and we'll talk about this with Michael Citro in a few minutes, he usually likes to play with one striker, but now he has two of them. He has the guy they brought in, and this is a look at the prospective lineup. He has the guy that they brought in Luis Muriel, and they also have Duncan Maguire, who they didn't expect to have, and it hasn't really worked yet. Orlando has trialed a two-striker formation the last few weeks with Maguire playing alongside Muriel. They lost 2-0 to Atlanta, and then they won at home last week against Austin with Jack Lynn playing alongside Muriel because Maguire was off with the US U23s. It seemed like this is a formation that Pareja will run. And just quickly going over the lineup again, Pedro Galese in goal is the Peruvian national team keeper. Rafael Santos, a Brazilian, had a goal and 3 assists last year. Robin Jansson's been in Orlando for a number of years. Bracalo next to him had 3 goals with Viking last year. Kyle Smith, a young American, had a goal and 2 assists. There's Angulo on the left side with 6 goals and 6 assists in 2023. Dagur Dan Thorhalsson, you're welcome, has 2 assists so far on this young season from Iceland. Nico Ladero, is coming on the downside of his career, frankly. After a legendary career in Seattle, he had 2 goals and 5 assists last season. Martin Ojeda on the right had 6 and 7 last year. Duncan McGuire scored 15 times for Orlando City in 2023 and has 3 goals this season. And then Muriel with Atalanta had 3 goals and 4 assists in 31 matches. Quickly looking at the history between these two clubs, this is the 21st meeting all time. Orlando's won the last 4. And the first of those 4 was the horrific U.S. Open Cup semifinal a number of years ago when the Red Bulls and Orlando were tied, and then everything went to crap in a horrific second half that saw New York leave the cup on the wrong side of a 5-1 scoreline. At Orlando, though, New York is 4-5-1. So they do have a history of playing well there. The last time these teams played, Joe, we mentioned this last week, was the last time that New York got really beaten as badly as they were in Columbus, and that's when they lost to Orlando 3-0 in June of 23. The last time the Red Bulls won was a 3-0 win for New York at Orlando in April of 22. BWP with 4 goals, Morgan with 2 goals all time. And so the question, sure, is they're riding high. They're getting pieces back. In the case of players like Ayla and Tolkien, some miles on the odometer during the midweek. Tolkien played pretty decently against with the U23s. He was called on handball against France in the box, which kind of stunk in their midfield in their friendly a few days ago. The U.S. miraculously came back with 2 late goals after the 85th to tie that game and tied Thierry Henry's French Olympic team. Forsberg, Forsberg played. Ayla played. We know what Corey Burke did. Coronel's Paraguay match, I believe, was called off. So, they get the band back together. And listen, we didn't talk about it until now, and then I'll shut up, I promise. At the end of the match against Miami, Serge Goma played. And he got first team minutes for the first time in a while. And Mitchell was on, and Julian Hall was on. And so I think this is as healthy as New York has been in a year.
Yeah.
So what do you got, my friend?
I think that part of the problem is Thor Holson is not a strong enough player to make up the gaps that Nico Ladero leaves. It's never not never, but it's usually not good to have a central pair get older. That's the case in Ladero, and I think that there's it's something in their chemistry that they need to figure out as a team to move forward. Luckily, it's not going to be this week. I think that with all the returning players, you can even let certain national team players remain on the bench to start. And you have a crew that is rolling and getting stronger. And that's the last thing this league wants to see.
Yeah. For New York this is a team that's hurting, right? And if McGuire, who is winded and can't go, which I honestly can't imagine. It is a lot of travel for 1 week, though, off to Europe and then back. He's a very talented kid whose stock is jumping big time. But nevertheless, New York has another chance to make a statement. I think the question really is, can they take the appropriate amount of energy? Schwarz isn't going to have them going in believing their press clippings. Most of the MLS media now has them firmly in the top 5 on most power rankings lists. And I still feel like this team doesn't really know who they are yet. Like, they've played 5 games, and I think things are all moving in the right direction. And yes, this team, I think it would be another statement win, obviously, for New York to get 3 more points on the road. But let's go to predictions, and let's think about what we might see. So we have some games Saturday, some games Sunday. Eastern teams, Philadelphia, who is undefeated. I think they only have 1 win, but they're undefeated. They're taking on a Loons side that is tied with New York on points.
I think that that's a great game, and I call it a draw.
Charlotte, who got a win last week, hosting Cincinnati at 7:30.
Charlotte at home, I don't bet against them. I like them for the
You're
win.
believing.
Yeah.
All right. DCU has Montreal in the district.
DCU has had a couple of bad results or upsetting results over the last few weeks, but I think they right the ship with a win over Montreal.
All right. Miami will still be without Messi, and they now host NYCFC. That's not a good team.
Yeah, but could they make some noise against Miami? I don't know. Call it a draw.
You have to imagine that playing on their home field and not in a monsoon might be exactly what the doctor ordered. Maybe they'll come out for the second half of that one. Surprising Toronto continues to surprise, or maybe they shouldn't surprise. It seems like us and them are the big surprises of 2024 so far, and they have SKC north of the border.
SKC like fell apart against the Galaxy at home. Yep. I don't see it going very well up there.
All right. Nashville welcomes Columbus in a yellow highlighter match at 8:30.
Draw.
Okay. That would be helpful. And then Sunday, there's a Sunday match, 3:30, Atlanta United welcomes Chicago to Mercedes-Benz.
The wind won't be helping, I think. So Atlanta.
Unlikely that the wind will be helping. And then lastly, our match Saturday at 7:30 p.m. That's Orlando City SC hosting the New York Red Bulls. What do you think?
The Orlando City has a much a better defense than Miami.
But yet they're conceding twice a game.
I know.
4 times a game, mind you, but
if the Red Bulls can get the center of the pitch working to their advantage, I'll call it a 2-1 win.
Okay. Before we go and bring on Michael Citro, and I'll be frank with you, it's not time yet to have him here, so we're going to talk a little bit more. You may have seen the news that broke this week about Emil Forsberg and his family challenges.
Yes.
And I was going to save it for the third segment, but we have it here. If you're not familiar, from what we understand, Emil Forsberg's wife presented an Instagram post in which she basically said, when you left for New York, you kind of ghosted your entire family. Now, they apparently have been together since they were teens, he and his wife, and they have 2 young kids. And I think the challenge to talk about this is that who are we to talk about this guy's private family life? If what she's saying is true, it's not great. But at the same time, it doesn't necessarily have bearing, perhaps, on his play unless it does. I think in a season that started with so much promise, this event, while obviously incredibly meaningful for Emil's wife and kids and Emil himself, as long as he is able to perform for the Red Bulls, perhaps it's best just leaving it at that. It literally is a personal family matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel great, though. It's not a positive thing. And that's really kind of all I wanted to say. Like, it's important that we acknowledge that this is happening because he is a very important piece of this team. I'm curious if you have any thoughts.
I'm kind of taking the wait and see approach. I don't want to weigh in on their personal business because you said it. Who are we to really weigh in? And I don't know the history or anything about them. So, yeah, I can't weigh in them on that. So I'm pretty much taking a stance of wait and see, and I hope all parties involved get closure or something of the like.
Yeah, and it's just a shame.
Yeah.
Did you give a let's drop this. Did you give a prediction?
I don't. Yes, 2-1.
2-1 for
Yes.
New York?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you can make the argument that the team that Orlando may be feeling a little bit of a lift after getting their first win of the season against Austin last week. I just think we're a lot better team than Austin, frankly, and we're coming in on a huge head of steam. Just to be different, I'll call it they gave up 2 goals. I'm going to call it a 2-2 draw, just because I think that, I think New York's going to find the net against this bad defense. One last thing before we go to break, and I'm stretching for time here. Thoughts on Burke coming back to the team? He made a post that basically was like, I made a mistake. It was at a bad time. Sorry, but I'm a human being, and all I can do is go forward, which is absolutely right.
I'm going to be incredibly tongue in cheek. I hope that he finds the net just as well as he did against the U.S.
When we're back on Seeing Red, we're going to talk to Michael Citro of the mainland. Keep it here. We are back at Seeing Red, the New York Soccer Roundup, getting ready for the Red Bulls on a full head of steam to head to Central Florida to tattoo the Lions for the first time in 5 meetings. And we're very, very happy to have back on the show once again from the mainland. It's Michael Citro. How are you, Michael?
I'm doing great, Mark. Thanks for inviting me back.
It's absolutely our pleasure. You get the call back. We liked you last time, so you get the call back. What has happened to you guys? We were expecting a continuation of a phenomenal team. You've got your historic crest going. You've got Oscar Pereira, a somewhat known quantity in terms of coaching. Tell us the story of what has happened to this team that stumbled so badly out of the gate.
Well, first of all, let me just thank you guys for the beatdown on Inter Miami. That warmed the cockles of our hearts, and it couldn't happen to a better team. We're a little tired of the whole Messi and pink thing at this point. But
yes,
to answer your question, the thing that happened to Orlando City is CONCACAF Champions Cup. As far as I'm concerned, the team was in a good place in preseason, probably looking as good as it has in any previous preseason, getting most of its players back. Didn't have really fully time to integrate Luis Muriel into the side in the preseason, and David Brecalo as well. Those are 2 guys that didn't quite get here in time. And Brecalo also had a knock that he was nursing when he arrived. So there was a couple of things there with some of the new guys. But some of the guys that played so well down the stretch last year got off to slow starts, probably because they were being asked to do a lot. Guys like Dan Dorelson, Rodrigo Schlegel did not get off to a good start. Rafa Santos did not get off to a good start. And it just they just weren't able to ever fully make corrections because they had to play, recover. They weren't really getting sufficient film sessions. They weren't really spending time on the pitch in training, correcting mistakes. So I think that's what we saw. And then when they finally had a full week this past week to prepare for an opponent, despite the fact that they were missing a lot of regulars from the international window, they went out and it was only 2-0, but they really smacked down Austin. Austin had no chance in this game, only 3 shot attempts, only a weak dribbler on target in stoppage time. They created nothing. And, it could have been a lot more lopsided than it was, but it was a comprehensive 2-0 win. I think shots were like 22-3.
Mm.
So you obviously said that a proper film session to go over what it was that they were doing. Talk about Nico Ladero. I think that his best playing days are behind him, and Dagar. Well, what's his name?
Dan Dorelson.
How were they pairing in the middle?
Well, the Dan's been playing right wing since, right fullback since late last season. He kind of inherited the position. It took him a little while to get up to speed, but he's settling in. He just had his best game of the year easily. 6 chance creations on Saturday. Nico Ladero has been doing a lot of the little things really, really well, but he had not yet quite started gelling with his teammates. And again, he had his best game of the year as well this past week. Aside from the phenomenal set piece goal, he was basically everywhere on the pitch. And, these guys in the 4-4-2 that Oscar has put out the last couple of games wasn't as successful at Atlanta, but again, they were coming back from Monterey, tough out in the Champions Cup, and had to go and play on that fake plastic grass in Atlanta, and they weren't quite there yet. They weren't quite recovered yet. I think they are finally feeling good and back in rhythm. Of course, some of the internationals won't have but a couple of days back with the team by the time we play on Saturday. But Nico's looking better each game, and he's learning where his teammates like to go, where they like to receive the ball. All of these things kind of take some time to come together, and because he's such a pivotal part in the middle of the pitch for Orlando City, that part of things coming together is going to dictate how successful this team's going to be.
I have 2 questions. First, is rain in the forecast on Saturday?
Well, this is Florida.
Yes, I know that.
I haven't looked, so I'll say definitely yes, it will probably rain because it always rains. I shouldn't say that, but it typically does rain at least part of every game.
Right.
On
you are aware that New York has had 2 home games played in absolute, really South Florida midsummer deluge. I mean, just bucketing rain. So that isn't going to phase them. I guess the question is, walk us through the craziness that happened with Duncan McGuire. And is this an embarrassment of riches for Pareja? Are these guys working together? I know it's still early, but Muriel and McGuire, is this a partnership that New York has to be concerned about?
This has been a very interesting transfer saga with Duncan, and it was reported early on in the offseason that the team was trying to come up with a new contract for Duncan. That is something that's a little bit new for the team. They typically let their rookies stay on their rookie contract for a couple of years. Show me you can do what you just did again. It was 1 year a fluke. That the rest of the league's going to catch up with you, start defending you differently. But I think they knew what they had in Duncan, and they definitely had some suitors, so they tried to lock him down. The 2 sides could not come to an agreement. I'm not going to name his name, but if you know who Duncan's agent is, he doesn't seem like the easiest person to work with. So there were some rumors that some of the teams in England were interested, in the championship, not in the Premier League, but championship teams. And they weren't terribly high up in the table championship teams. Another year in MLS and Duncan could have gotten better offers from better teams, more successful clubs, maybe even in the Premier League. But when talks broke down, the player decided he wanted to go. They tried to make that move to Blackburn. And it was just very bizarre because it seemed like everything was in place. And then Blackburn kind of nixed the deal. And then we were hearing reports that they weren't allowed to purchase any players in the window because they didn't have the financial means to do it. They tried to sell a player, one of their young midfielders. I think they ended up selling him and having the money to do this deal. And then they forgot to submit the paperwork to the league before the deadline. And this is the second year in a row that they've apparently had this issue in Blackburn. Last year it was an oversight, and this year they thought they had submitted it. But I guess the way it is, because it's an online portal, they saved the paperwork, but they didn't submit the paperwork. And the appeal was denied. So Duncan returned to Orlando. To answer your second part of your question, there is a nice partnership developing with Muriel, but mostly Oscar used a 4-2-3-1 in the early going.
Right.
And now he's kind of looking back at the 4-4-2. And what's good about this from Muriel's perspective is that he likes to go get the ball. He likes to go get involved in the buildup and be part of the attack. And he's really good with his feet, unlike a lot of strikers. So he can be part of that, give and go, these quick, short passes. Like Ladero, he's still learning where everybody likes to go and where they like the ball. Muriel played very well with Jack Lynn, a kid from our MLS Next Pro team, the other night against Austin. And I think we're going to continue to probably see that 4-4-2 for a little bit longer. But the problem with the 4-4-2 for Orlando is you're taking a midfielder off the field when you do that. And there's an embarrassment of riches in the midfield with Martino Heda and Facundo Torres and Nico Ladero and Ivan Angulo. Somebody's got to sit.
Yeah. Talk to us about how important playing at home is for this team. They played on the road much of this year, and just getting back home, what it means to them.
Well, I mean, we've seen it year after year. MLS teams struggle on the road. Even good ones a lot of times struggle on the road. Oddly enough, Orlando was very, very good on the road last year.
Yeah.
Didn't start out so good at home, but then they got it together. The second half of the season, they were as good at home as anyone in the league. And I expect that they'll have another similar season at home when it's all said and done. So I think it's important. But for Orlando, maybe it's not as important as for some other teams. They're perfectly comfortable going on the road and grinding out results. They kind of take on Oscar Pareja's mentality, and they just go out and are difficult to beat when they're on the road. But at home, sometimes they try to show a little bit too much flair, and then they get caught. Maybe they only give up 3 scoring chances, but they give up 2 goals on those scoring chances. So it can bite them that way when they're playing at home from time to time. But that said, they've gone a good, I don't know, like 8 or 9 months without a loss at home before losing at home here to start this season. So they got to draw it against Montreal in the opener, but then they lost to Minnesota. A game they really had enough chances. They could have scored 4 or 5 goals in that game. Minnesota only had a few chances, and they happened to score on all of them.
So that said, Michael, Saturday night, 7:30 at what's it called? Inter & Co. Stadium now? Your name here stadium. Do you have a prediction for us?
I don't like the name of the stadium. I don't necessarily have anything against the company, but Inter & Co. is a mouthful, to say the least. It's better than what they have down south, Dervpunk.
Well, it's Chase Stadium now.
Now it's Chase. That's right. It's easier to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when these two teams play, it gets pretty weird sometimes. I think I'm going to go with my standard 2-1 home victory for Orlando prediction. Although the way Lewis Morgan's playing, if they let him get loose, it could be a long night for them.
Awesome, Michael. Where can fans find you and the mainland?
Well, the mainland is available on Twitter. I refuse to call it by the single letter name that idiotic
We're all in with you, my friend.
But spelled Maine like a lion's mane. We're big on our puns at the mainland. So TheManeland, the mainland on Twitter. We're also on Blue Sky for the same billionaire reasons. And you can read our stuff at themainland.com. And if you're interested in learning a little bit more about the opposition, that's a place to go for Orlando City news.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael. We've got more Seeing Red coming up after this short break.
This is Seeing Red, now in our 15th season of bringing you the best in independent Red Bull.
That's the title one. I'm still working it out. Oh, Lordy. Did you know, Joe? Did you know that you can actually write us every single week if you want? We tend not to. If you're writing us, though, every week, you're probably not going to get read every week. I'm just going to throw it out there. Like, we need to keep it fresh. We do have some folks that have started writing every week, and we appreciate them and we love them. But, yes, you are muted, my friend. I cannot hear you.
Dad, knock it off.
Knock it off, Dad. Knock it off. Yeah, just write us every other week. We'll get a nice we'll slip you in. Here is Scott 6. You want to read this one or shall I?
I can do it.
Go for it.
Mark and Joe, excuse the clickbait headline. Ooh. Just finished watching the Morgan-led beatdown of the pink team from the Sunshine State. As someone who is evangelized for American soccer for his entire adult life, I am so embarrassed by what MLS has allowed Miami to do on paper and how the retirees were allowed to act on the pitch. Whether it was flops and crying, feigning head wounds and ankle fractures, or deciding the match would commence when they decided it should. Not a moment sooner after halftime. Just an all-around disgrace. Maybe I still have a bad taste in my mouth from Suarez' dental antics over the years. But I just got so angry seeing a team that doesn't take this league seriously and assumes they're owed things on the pitch because Apple, Adidas, and MLS handed them whatever they wanted off it. 3 cheers for Morgan and the boys who played fantastic. I'm excited to see what a real team can do in Harrison. Scott from North Plainfield.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly seemed like they were setting their own agenda. And Suarez seemed miserable from the first minute he walked out for player introductions. And he seemed even more miserable that the nerve they had to ask us to actually play the second half. How dare they? Don't you know?
I have a great sticker idea or T-shirt idea for anyone that wants to run with it. But Cannibal Corpse with Luis Suarez's face on it.
Yes, I like it. Yeah, I mean, there's literally no way that you can look at this match and not think anything other than it was a magical day, afternoon. It was real unfortunate that the weather was so bad. There were streets of Harrison that were flooded. The Jackson Street Bridge was closed. It was a absolute nightmare. It took people far too long to get in and out. But those fans that were there will never forget that drubbing that they delivered Miami. So
I had shades of the Ronald Waterous hyperthermia game.
Yes. Yeah. For sure. Thank you, Scott, for your note. Here's Jeffrey Cooley, who says, "Hey, Mark and Joe, who said playing through international breaks was a bad thing? Well, I'm sure everyone at the stadium wished for better weather. It wasn't going to be worse. I thoroughly enjoyed watching the game from my couch. I was both excited and impressed in the team's ability to bounce back and execute their game plan so well, especially without the international players. It would be hard to say we missed them during that performance. Most impressive to me was Vanzeir. I started the night bemoaning his inability to score a goal after he missed those 2 chances, but the 4 assists were incredible. Finding a connection with the midfield and touching the ball in the space for Morgan to score was an exciting thing to watch over and over again. This pairing up top has excited me more than Manuel and anyone else so far. Maybe the DP9 has been with us all along in Morgan. I don't think so, but he's making a case for it. Thanks for all the hard work you both put into this wonderful podcast. Let's go, Red Bull." That's Jeff Cooley. Again, it speaks to they're doing great. They're overperforming expectations. Does Red Bull need to bring in more attacking talent?
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. Lewis Morgan is definitely making a case for a DP number 9, and I'm slightly proud of Dante Vanzeir, how much he's worked on his persona in the game, and I wholeheartedly appreciate that, and I think that the fans appreciate it as well.
Yeah. I mean, think about it. There are only 5 teams in the league that have scored more goals than the Red Bulls this season so far. Miami, LA has 12. Cincinnati. What just happened? I was looking at it, and then the page self-sorted again. Miami has 13, LA with 12, St. Louis with 10, Portland with 9, Chicago with 9, and then a number of teams are on 8 goals scored, including the Red Bulls. So I get, the question is, if they continue to score at this clip, at what point, like at a certain point, the window is going to open again. The window is still open, by the way. The transfer window is still open. But you have to think to yourself, you really have to question whether or not this is the case. And when you have players leading the league in both goals and assists, I don't know.
Maybe hedging your bets
Perhaps
for when you lose them.
Yes, for sure. Okay, you've got the next and last one from a familiar name.
Zach Feldman. Good evening, Mark and Joe. Normally, after such a big win, I would be writing to talk about how good this team is. But that's not what I want to write about today. Having listened to Seeing Red every single week, it is remarkable to see the progress Joe is making in his recovery. Listening to the most recent pod, I was so impressed with how clearly Joe is speaking and reading emails. You guys are doing fantastic work to be able to provide insight and analysis on the team each and every week. And Joe is just an incredible human being. Keep up the great work. Statman Zach Feldman. P.S. For some thoughts on the game, maybe Miami should have stayed in the locker room for a little longer. Clearly, they didn't inject Suarez with enough steroids.
Oh, no. Yes,
Thanks,
I
Zach.
second that emotion, Zach. That's a lovely note. It's very inspiring to see how Joe is improving week by week. Any final thoughts as we close this sucker up?
I think that let's go Red Bulls. I keep wanting to I keep wanting the team to keep rolling. I don't know, but I think that that's a wonderful sentiment to take, and
It's a good place to end. Of course, do this, do that. Joe calls Saturday night's match a
2-1 win.
Red Bulls win. I'm going to call it a 2-2 draw for our guest Michael Citro and for Zach Feldman on stats and emails, apparently. And for Joe and for me, Mark, thank you so much for listening and watching to episode 568 of Seeing Red. We will be back next week, everyone. Thank you very much. Have a good night. Let's go Red Bulls. Wait, we got to play the music. We got to play it off. Hold on, here it comes.